Good morning. Holly said that it was providential that I would be speaking on trusting in trouble today. The other side of that is terrifying. So here we are. We are indeed, my name is Doug Anderson, and we are indeed continuing on our sermon series, Trusting God. I will remind you that Micah used his own amateur car repairs, particularly his repairing of his brakes, and the potential danger this might mean for the community as an example of trust. It occurred to me that perhaps he has invited me to participate in this series with the same object lesson in mind. Hopefully I won't cause a crash. On a completely unrelated matter, Micah has been working quite a bit on a car, I understand. And I think he's hoping donations will be made, so feel free to see Carol in the office later. So, trusting in God. What comes to my mind right away is that it's difficult. Because I think trusting in God gets to the heart of what it is that we believe, how we believe, and indeed if we believe. And so this morning I want to explore some of these harder topics. When we trust a person, right, a friend, a spouse, or horror of horrors, a child, we have reasons for doing so, right? We have seen them in various situations over time. And, we've built up trust in their character, hopefully, right? And we would have good answers, if we trust them, to questions like, can they navigate the unseen? Will they do the right thing? Will they make good decisions with the best of intentions, skill, and strength, right? And at some point, if we trust them, we might say, I don't know why they did this, but I trust them. And so too, if we have spent time with God, if we've walked with Jesus and tried to listen to the Spirit through various situations in our lives, we again have a growing trust. And we might ask those same sort of questions, right? Can God navigate the unforeseen? Will he make good decisions? Does he have the best of intentions, skill, and strength? Of course, we say. And at some point, we might say, I don't know why he did this, but I trust him. But there it is, right? That's the problem, is that I don't always like the way God works. I want a problem to be resolved this way, right? Meaning my way. I want it to be done in a timely manner, which usually means immediately, right? I try to trust him, but sometimes I have my doubts. Sometimes he doesn't even solve the problem at all. So again, I don't see trust so much as a black and white, all or nothing sort of thing, but trust is something that grows. Trust is slow. And trust is a word that mingles and overlaps with other words, right? Faith, belief, action, hope. It's hard to define, but we know what it is when it's there, because trust makes a difference, right? Trust is strong. Now, when things do go very badly in our lives, we are left wounded and confused. And this may cause us to stop trusting in God. Or we may have to dig down to a deeper layer of trust. We may need to take a longer, wider view of trusting him. We have to put more of ourselves into this kind of trust, because this is the kind of trust that asks, is God actually there? Is he truly good? Will he work to redeem the bad things that happen? So trust is slow, trust is strong, and trust is deep. So, Doug, trust sounds so great. Let's all do it, right? So I do see that, especially in our current world, there are some particular challenges to belief. One of them is the way that our culture thinks. And we, as part of our culture, we have a lot of this ourselves. And secondly, we have the problem of our human vulnerability. So I do want to spend a few minutes thinking about these things and how they impact our trust in God. So looking at belief first, we're going to go deep here for a few minutes. We're going to go a little bit below belief. And some folks like Charles Taylor and James K.A. Smith, they've looked at the past, and they've looked at, several hundred years ago in Western, quote-unquote, Christian countries. There were a number of things that weren't so much believed as they were just taken for granted, right? People looked at the natural world, the landscape, the plants, the animals. I'm a little concerned for the photographer in this one. The plants, the animals, the stars, and there was an understanding, it was just taken for granted that all these things pointed to something beyond themselves. In seeing such beauty, order, and power, one was led to a sense of awe. This is exactly what Holly prayed for us about just now. And this sense of awe would lead one beyond creation to wonder about the Creator. Another thing that was not so much believed as was taken for granted was that society itself was grounded in something bigger. It too was grounded in the order that God had created, right? Society was not simply a human project that we had invented. And morality, right and wrong, and good and evil, these are not just based on values or preferences that we might choose from a list, but rather society and morality are also grounded in a reality that is beyond our world. There's a truth to these things. In the same way, Taylor would say that the world was seen to be enchanted. Now, he doesn't mean this in the magical sense, but same as the first two, this meant that the world was open to something beyond our physical world. Forces of good and evil played into the world, for both good and bad, of course. People participate in good or evil, and usually both. For example, temptation might take one away from the good, and grace might bring us back. Oh, there we go. Now, today in our so-called secular society, it's not so much believed as taken for granted that the universe is self-contained. It contains all matter and only matter, and this matter obeys the physical laws that operate within these so-called walls. There's no grand plan, there's nothing outside of that. So too, if there's no beyond, there's no purpose or meaning other than that which we choose. And we alone decide what has meaning and purpose for our own individual lives. And my beliefs are my private business. Thank you very much, right? We're very much individualistic on these things. So the world sort of spins along, and we do our best to be happy, or powerful, or rich, or dominating, or famous, whichever thing you value, without concern for some imagined eternity. The world is sort of a starship enterprise, right? With its own food and water, and we invent our lives within it, okay? Now, this isn't altogether bad news, right? In the past, several hundred years ago, if the king converted to a new religion, you did too. Or you might be slaughtered or marginalized, depending on the tone of the monarchy at the time. And those in power and authority have coerced and manipulated people in the name of faith since the beginning. Today, we agree that people are respected when they have their say, and that their beliefs must be authentic, right? You can't force someone into belief, and we see this in the gospel. Jesus was invitational, right? Come and see. So it's not that we should want to go back to some golden age and simply ignore things that we now know about science or ignore people's freedoms to think for themselves. We shouldn't want to go back. I don't want a state that is run by a church, which quickly becomes a reverse. But it does mean that as we walk with Jesus, it helps us to understand that there are assumptions in our culture that need to be thought through because we too live and breathe in this culture. So we need something of conversion in how we see the world to help us believe and trust in Him. As Paul says in Romans, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. One of Charles Taylor's most helpful insights is that our modern culture is haunted. It's haunted by the Christian past. Most of the time we carry on in our culture, in our drudging way, but people still have stirrings and experiences that seem to point to something meaningful that is beyond our reach. It might be that experience of awe that we talked about out in creation. It might be in music or art. We often hear words like otherworldly or unbelievable or amazing or transcendent or spiritual. And we might ask about the deeper meaning of our lives when we're faced with incredible goodness or beauty or heroism or fear or evil. We might ask about the deeper meaning of our lives at a birth or a death or a wedding, or as we know, during a tragedy. I'm thankful that we prayed for the church in Tumble Ridge this morning. But it's as though we're trying to break out of this modern cage as a culture that we're in, like the light streaming through in this picture of Grand Central Station, right? Or maybe something else is trying to break in. Many artists feel this tension, and in their work they try to tell us about it. Taylor calls this idea cross pressure. We're stuck in the middle, but we're feeling that life is flat as a culture. We're feeling that life is flat or empty without a larger story to find ourselves in. A recent novel started with the line, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." So we go back to our other religions: shopping, sports, money, activism. And maybe those moments of awe, and similarly the practice of gratitude, for example, maybe these are early steps on the road to worship, right? But these instincts of awe and gratitude, they don't have an object, right? Our culture's thank yous sort of bounce off the tin ceiling of our self-contained worldview. But because of this tension, many are finding that this modern framework is failing them. In fact, it seems to be Gen Z, elbows up. Maybe this Gen Z generation may be the first generation that's getting off that train, actually. We are regularly told, right, that attendance and participation in Christian churches in the last decades and centuries really has been declining every generation, right? But young people, for them, the freedom to make your own meaning, to value what you want, to be a self-created person, has actually led to great levels of anxiety and feeling empty and lost. This burden of responsibility to create a world of and for themselves, multiplied by the greenhouse effect of social media, right, makes these problems even worse. And they also feel haunted, right? They have that sense that there's something more, something beyond. And Gen Z is telling us what they're looking for. They're longing for an anchor, and they're longing for roots. A few weeks ago, Yuri spoke in this series about the trusting God being like a solid anchor. And Micah spoke about the deep roots that come with trusting God. And many young people are finding a home in the realization that they belong, that they are God's children, no questions asked. And their participation and involvement in Christian things that they can measure, church attendance, group meetings, Bible studies, they've not only gone up to where their parents' generation is, they've actually surpassed their grandparents' generation. You should have a look at some of the things that are happening, particularly in Europe, in UK, in North America, especially in bigger cities. But they have found an anchor, right? And his name is Jesus. So that's the belief thing. I want to talk for a few minutes about our vulnerability. I said earlier, and this is the harder thing, I said that I find trusting God difficult because I don't like how he works at times. And by that, I mean I don't like what he allows to happen. I think this occurs for us especially when things fall apart, when something really bad happens, not just in the broader world, but in our community, to our families, to ourselves. Nowadays, we know so much. We can control so much. I don't need to list the many ways that humans can manipulate their environment and each other and the world that people of the past would have marveled at, right? Illnesses that were previously deadly are now cured. If you want to go to another continent, if you can afford it, you can go tomorrow. There's innumerable ways to distract and entertain ourselves, right? And all of this is perhaps why we are shocked when we find ourselves to be vulnerable. It turns out that we can't control everything. It seemed like we could, and then this happens. The world can harm us. Our relationships can fail. Life can bruise us and those we love. We ourselves can make terrible mistakes. It can all go sideways. And all those ways that we do have control seem not to matter when real trouble visits our lives. And this is important because often our toughest challenges to trusting God occur in the setting of some sort of harm or loss. We turn to Him, asking that He change this thing. Don't let it happen. Undo it. Right? And sometimes He does. But often He doesn't. And even worse, we come to realize that He allows this. Right? These are our options. Either He isn't there, or He's not so good, or He's not so strong, or He allows it. And I believe that trusting in God means that we must face our vulnerability. It is not all about us. We are each going to die. Our vulnerability must form part of the substance of our character. We need to understand that we are vulnerable. Preserving our comfort is not God's top priority, but that is not the end of the story. We must trust that while He allows this thing to happen, God sees this, and God is present in this. Micah said these things last week, maybe more politely than I'm saying them today. But God does not build a bunker or a wall around our church, our families, or ourselves. The danger is real, but so is His presence. So we have that story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were about to be thrown into the fiery furnace, right, by Nebuchadnezzar if they didn't bow to his latest idol. They said, no, we will not do that. But not only that, they said, we know that our God can save us from this furnace, but even if He doesn't, right, they knew that they were vulnerable. Even if He doesn't, we're not bowing to this idol. And they're essentially saying, we're putting our trust, our longer, wider trust in God's faithfulness. We will not abandon that trust even in the face of the evil that God permits. So for Daniel's friends, things turned out rather well immediately, right? Not only were there 3 of them saved from within the fire, there was a 4th mysterious person in there with them, right? God is present in our trouble. And then we find Jesus in the garden. Here's Jesus alone. Alone because His friends have left Him, in a sense, to sleep, but soon enough they will abandon Him entirely. Jesus knows what's coming. He's about to be arrested. He's about to be beaten and humiliated and crucified. We see here Jesus praying, if there's any way that you, God, can remove this cup, please remove it. Jesus did not like what was about to happen. He asked that this would not happen, that this would not go this way, right? I'm asking you to undo this, to change this, Jesus prays. But I'm setting my requests, my desires, my hopes, my safety, everything aside. He knows He is vulnerable. Not as I will, but as you will, right? He's saying, come what may, yes, Father. And God sends a comforter, an angel to him. But even then, he was sweating as though it was blood. He was trusting, but it was as hard as it gets. When the time came, he stood up and faced what is happening. Right? Trust is strong. And I want to point out something. There's no punctuation in biblical Greek. Am I right, Micah? 2 thumbs up. But there's a semicolon between take this cup, semicolon, yet not my will, but yours be done. That kind of jumped out at me as I was reflecting on this passage. How long does a semicolon last? Have you ever timed one? Right? How long did it take for Jesus to get from take this cup to your will be done? How long does it take us to get there? Now, actually, the accounts in Matthew and Mark have something of an answer. Jesus went back to his disciples, then back to praying 3 times, praying the same words. Father, take this cup. Your will be done. Trusting God in the midst of trouble is difficult, right? It's quite remarkable for us to see his humanity in this moment, struggling with this reality. And I think we can take encouragement in our struggles, right? We don't have to be spiritually perfect. We're on a journey with him. We're learning to trust him. But we see Jesus making the decision to trust his Father, his character and his faithfulness, and then to go forward, right? He acts on his trust. Trust is slow, trust is strong, and trust is deep. But that too is not the end of the story. We know that just a few days later, Jesus was resurrected. The Easter story takes place. The course of the entire cosmos has changed. God's redeeming plan is well underway. And in that longer, wider view, we trust that the here and now of our lives, the joys and sorrows, find their place in God's story. So here we are. So trust is in part an emptying, a surrendering. It's a surrendering of the illusion that we are in control. It's a surrendering of our plans. It's an accepting that we are vulnerable. But this emptying is an emptying that allows a filling. He meets us in our struggles. He brings us angels to comfort us. And often they look like our brothers and sisters. We trust in his character. And even while we can't grasp it all with our heads, we can have his peace in our hearts, even as we sweat, right? We can sing, "Blessed be your name," on a road marked with suffering. This whole sermon really is a struggle to sing that song. And so, yes, we put our trust in him in light of the crucifixion, but we also put our trust in him in the bright light of the resurrection. God is a creator, and he is making things new. He is restoring, he's redeeming, and he's transforming. He fills us with faith, hope, and love. And we trust in the light of the triune God. We trust the faithfulness of the Father. We trust that Jesus the Son understands us and leads the way for us. And we trust that the Spirit is with us, leading and comforting us, and that he's within us and builds us slow, strong, and deep. Some of you know that Jackie and I help direct summer camp every summer, a summer camp like you've never seen. After the fall of Afghanistan, some of those who needed to escape for their lives found their way to Vancouver, and they'd become part of a community outreach program through 10th Alliance Church. And a very good friend of ours who's there has really become the anchor for that community, and she's a friend of ours through camp, and she said, these folks would love camp. So we've held this, we're coming up to 5 years now, and it's really an amazing week. And midweek, we hold a little chapel service in this beautiful outdoor chapel that we have. It's optional, no coercion, right? Rule number 1. And the first year, we just had a few people come. This past year, maybe because of growing trust, we had a few dozen people come. And near the end of this last service, a young woman asked if she could speak. So we said, the floor is yours. We didn't know she was a Christian. All of this is very risky for these folks. There's layers of culture, of religion, of politics, and family. But she said to her compatriots and all of us, she said, I want you to know that you don't need to be afraid to pray to Jesus. I prayed to Jesus, and Jesus changed my life. I'm no longer angry. I'm no longer fearful. And now I can forgive. She trusts Jesus. She is known and loved, and her life is a new creation. Though the dread of night overwhelms my soul, he is here with me. I'm not alone. Oh, his love is sure, and he knows my name. For my God is the Ancient of Days. Amen.